الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. We continue inshallah ta'ala with Surah Talaq, Surah number 65 and the second ayah inshallah, the second verse in Surah At-Talaq. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless our gatherings always with the Quran. Start with the citation. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. فإذا بلغن أجلهن فأمسكوهن بمعروف أو فارقوهن بمعروف وأشهدوا ذوي عدل منكم وأقيموا الشهادة لله ذلكم يوعظ به من كان يؤمن بالله واليوم الآخر ومن يتق الله يجعل له مخرجا ويرزقه من حيث لا يحتسب ومن يتوكل على الله فهو حسبه إن الله بالغ أمره قد جعل الله لكل شيء قدرا. We talked about the ayat yesterday, so we'll go straight to the tafsir inshallah. Second ayah, فَإِذَا بَلَغْنَا أَجَلَهُنْ, then when they are about to fulfill their term appointed, either take them back in a good manner or part with them in a good manner, and take for witness two just persons from among you, and establish the witness for Allah. That will be an admonition given to him who believes in Allah and the last day, and whosoever fears Allah and keeps his duty to him, he will make a way for him to get out from every difficulty. So this is continuing from the first ayah, all the ahkam that were mentioned with the iddah, with after the talaq, after the divorce, and the command from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make ihsa' of al-iddah wa ahsul iddah, to count the iddah to make sure that it's done in the right way. And then this ayah talks about what happens after the iddah period, after the waiting period is finished. And as mentioned, this is for the first or the second talaq, because at-talaq marratan. Talaq is only twice that has a iddah where these ahkam mentioned in the first verse applies to it. If it's a third talaq, then they have to depart from each other immediately. And it's not permissible for the wife to stay with the husband even for 1 second after the third talaq. There's no waiting period, meaning for them to be together. It's only waiting period to make sure that she's not pregnant for her if she wants to remarry. But the iddah, which is after the first and the second talaq, that maybe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala changed the matter between them and they return back, and this is one of the wisdoms behind the waiting period, and they stay together, so that maybe this will be means for them to return back again and not to continue with the talaq. as mentioned yesterday. Then after that in this ayah, فَإِذَا بَلَغْنَ أَجَلَهُنْ. فَإِذَا بَلَغْنَ أَجَلَهُنْ. This is referring to the women, and that's why it's in the feminine tense. فَإِذَا بَلَغْنَ أَجَلَهُنْ. If they reach أَجَلَهُنَّ, the أجل is the time limit, which is the end of the iddah. Here the ayah, if you go literally with the verse, what does it say? It says فَإِذَا بَلَغْنَ. If they reach their limit, that means the iddah is over. But that's not what it means. It means here إِذَا قَارَبْنَا انقضاء العدة, when they're close to finishing the iddah. So this is a benefit that we learn, that sometimes in the language, it depends on the context, of course, that the words used that if the time finishes, but it refers to when it's very close to be finished. Why? Because if it finishes, they're strangers to one another. They cannot be together. So that's why here فَإِذَا بَلَغْنَ أَجَلَهُنَّ أي قَارَبْنَ. That means they're very close. Al-qurb is the closeness, and the noon here is the noon of al-niswa, meaning if the women, if إِذَا قَارَبْنَ انقضاء, the ending of the iddah. لأنهن, he says, why this is the meaning, if they're close to finishing the iddah, because if they لأنهن لو خرجنا من العدة, because if they finished the iddah, they come out of it, they're done with it, which is 3 menses, as we heard. لم يكن الزوج مخيرا بين الإمساك والفراق. The husband, he does not have a choice whether to keep her or to depart. Why? Because it's already over. So he has no right to take her back unless it's a new contract with the waliya and so on. So he has no right whatsoever in this case. So that's why فَإِذَا بَلَغْنَ أَجَلَهُنَّ means if they're close to the end of the iddah time. Then the husband should make his choice whether to keep the wife or to continue with الطلاق. فإذا بلغن أجلهن فأمسكوهن بمعروف. فأمسكوهن, الإمساك is to hold something. So فأمسكوهن, meaning the women, the wife, بمعروف. And this is in the plural tense because the khitab or the verses is addressing who? The believers, all of them. So this is why it's in the plural tense. فأمسكوهن بمعروف. So keep them, meaning without continuing with the divorce, to keep the marriage bond, but with the condition that it's بمعروف, with goodness, with what is known of good. He says أي على وجه المعاشرة الحسن, according to the good living together. المعاشرة is when people live together, so the good living together. والصحبة الجميلة. الصحبة, like the companionship, there is a beautiful one, the beautiful companionship. لا على وجه الضرار, not upon the way of harming, like he wants to keep her so that he can harm her, so that she doesn't, get married to someone else, or he wants to abuse her more, or abuse this right that he has, in which he can take her back after the divorce, or the first or the second one, so to prolong her misery, basically, right? So this is someone that, as the ayat also would talk about this, and it's in Surah Al-Baqarah, when it talks about the talaq and the divorce, the fear of Allah, to be obedient to Allah, to be watchful, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees what's in the hearts. Because usually in these things, people, they want to revenge. They tend to get all of whatever grudges they have, and this is deen. So they should fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and not act upon what they're feeling and things of that nature. فَأَمْسِكُهُنَّ بِمَعْرُوف. Did not say فَأَمْسِكُهُنَّ and that's it, but بِمَعْرُوف, with goodness, not to harm. وَإِرَادَةُ الشَّرِّ وَالْحَبْسِ, not to be having the will of a shar, evil, or al-habs. Al-habs is to keep her as like a hostage, like imprisoning her. So this is something that they would do in the Jahiliyyah. They would divorce and then take her back, divorce and take her back. So she becomes like this. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made the divorce only twice. And the third time, it's a final one. Why? Because of this, to stop this abuse that can happen if the right of the husband to divorce and the right of the husband to take her back, he has only 2 times to do this. And if he wants to take her back, it has to be with that intention of goodness, not with the intention of evil. He says, فَإِنَّ إِمْسَكَهَا عَلَى هَذَا الْوَجْهِ لَا يَجُوزُ. So to bring her back or to Al-imsak again is to hold back to the relationship of marriage to cause harm or to increase the harm to her. This is not permissible, of course. And the ayat of the Quran and with the ahkam, it's so important. As important as the hukm is to know how the hukm is to be applied. So many people, they don't pay attention to بمعروف, right? They only pay attention to فأمسكوهن. He wants to take his wife back. He's not thinking that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him this right, but with a condition. فَأَمْسِكُهُنَّ بِمَعْرُوف. If he's not going to be able to keep her with ma'ruf, with goodness, he can't control himself, the evil is all over him, then the other choice is spacious enough for him. أو فارقهن بمعروف. Or depart. فارقهن المفارقة is when you depart from someone. So أو فارقوهن, depart from them. That means the divorce becomes final. بمعروف, also with goodness. So even the مفارقة, even if the period of al-idda is ending and they're not going to be husband and wife anymore, then that also has to be done with ma'ruf, with goodness. How can the firaq, how can the departing from one another becomes with ma'ruf? He says, لا محذور فيه. Nothing haram in it, without any haram, without anything that are forbidden from doing. من غير تشاتم ولا تخاصم. Without التشاتم. التشاتم is to revile one another, to say bad words to one another. ولا تخاصم, and no disputes. And as if this is the norm. When people divorce, they have to have a dispute. Unless the exceptions is that you would rarely find if there's a divorce, there's decency and goodness and respect and all kinds of things. That rarely happens because shaitan works in this. And you see how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned the ma'ruf in both cases. To keep her with ma'ruf, or even if there's a divorce, with ma'ruf. And if there is children, also to be with matters of ma'ruf, with kindness. Everybody wants to be victorious over the other one. Everyone wants to defeat the other one, to step over the other one, to revenge. All of that is from shaitan. Has nothing to do with the deen of Allah. And so here, أو فارقوهن بمعروف. And that's why those who are dealing with these situations, a qadi or a judge or a alim or whatever there is, to remind the people, it's not just about get us divorced, get us married. There is rulings that applies as a result of this. So here بمعروف. He says ولا قهر لها على أخذ شيء من مالها. And without al-qahr. Al-qahr is when someone is forcing someone under his, oppressing someone. Like here he says specifically, without causing her to be, or oppressing her to take something of her money in return for her to be divorced or something like this. All of these things, if the judge is seeing that, the ruling can be applied to be against one's intentions. So فأمسكوهن بمعروف أو فارقوهن بمعروف. And the ma'ruf is repeated for both. وأشهدوا, so this is the rulings, the hukm, when the period is ending, to either keep her with ma'ruf or to depart with ma'ruf. And more, وأشهدوا ذوي عدل منكم. أشهدوا, this is the command, the verb of a shahada or witness. So that means make sure that you have witnesses to what you did. What is witness over what? على طلاقها ورجعتها. To have witnesses, and it says that way, two witnesses when he divorced, and two witnesses that he returned her back, or he took her back. So two witnesses there. وأشهدوا ذوي عدل منكم. ذوي means two, from ذو. عدل, justice. And al-adala, even though it means justice, but it refers to justice and more. Two minkum, from among yourselves. That means two Muslim men that are just, meaning that they are righteous, upright, not someone that openly commits sins or have fusuq or rebelling against the commands of Allah. So to make two just individuals known to be honest and truthful, to take them as witnesses. أي رجلين مسلمين عدلين, has to be like this, nothing else. Not one on one. رجلين, two men, مسلمين, Muslims, and they are عدلين. They are righteous and upright. He says لأن في الإشهاد المذكور, because in this ishhad or this witnessing, al-ishhad is the witnessing. Ashhidu is the fa'ul amr, is the command, make witnesses. Ash-shahada is the witness itself. So the act of al-ishhad or witnessing al-madhkur, the one that is mentioned, why is that? سدا لباب المخاصمة. It blocks سد. It stops, it blocks the gate of al-mukhasama or dispute. A person forgetting, a person even wants to, hide the fact that he divorced so that he would have another chance. All kinds of things can happen, which is haram. So, and plus to remove all the different things that might be in dispute, and he only remembered that he divorced one time, and she says, no, it's two times, it's three times. So when they have witnesses, then it removes all of these disputes. سدا لباب المخاصمة وكتمان كل منهما ما يلزمه بيان. Also prevents them from each one from hiding what they are supposed to show. ما يلزمه بيان, or that he has to show. And that's why there's, again, in disputes, if there's no disputes, the matter is easy. But when there's a dispute, and if it's after 3 divorces, it's final. The woman, she says her husband divorced her 3 times. He says, no, I only divorced her 2 times. She remembers a third, he doesn't remember. And why is that? Because there's no witnesses. And because witnessing here is not a mandatory thing, by the way. So, but this is the sunnah, this is the proper way. So what happened in this case, if they go in front of the judge will give the ruling based on, does she have evidence? No. So the ruling is that he only divorced twice. But then she will be advised. She knows for sure that it's 3 times. She has to stay away from him. It's haram for them to be together. So then if the only way and the husband is refusing, so the only way is to make khula. But it's haram for her to go back to him. Even if the judge makes the ruling that it's only twice. Even if he, documents are written, they're not divorced, it doesn't matter. She knows for sure that he divorced her 3 times. That means she has to stay away from him. In this case, then with regards to the legality of it, then she should depart from the marriage with khula. There's details to this. So ashhidu, to avoid all of this, واشهدوا, make witness ذوي عدل منكم, two عدل, righteous, upright from among you. وأقيموا الشهادة لله. وأقيموا الشهادة لله, which means establish. This who is addressed by أقيموا الشهادة, establish the witness to Allah. The shuhada, the witnesses. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying to those who witness, أقيموا الشهادة, establish the shahada for the sake of Allah. This is a amana, this is a heavy trust. Right? So if they are in dispute, and then the friend of the husband, he goes to his friend, can you witness for me that I only divorced twice? And the guy comes and lies shahadat zur, goes to the hellfire if he does such a thing. So that's why وَأَقِيمُوا الشَّهَادَةَ لِلَّهِ. It's not an easy matter to make sure that he understand for both. He get the witness to witness, and he doesn't have to bring him for both of them to be there. It's just sufficient that the husband or the man would say to 2 people that he divorced his wife or he returned back his wife. So وَأَقِيمُوا الشَّهَادَةَ لِلَّهِ أَيِئْتُوا بِهَا عَلَى وَجْهِهَا, to bring it, to be upon it, upon the right way of it. The word wajh is mentioned here more than one time. Al-wajh is the face, right? But when they talk على وجه الإضرار, على وجه الإصلاح, it's not like on the face of righteousness, on the face of harm. It means on the matter of. So it kind of give this non-physical meaning. So إِيتُوا بِهَا عَلَى وَجْهِهَا, to do it according to what it's supposed to be. So when you say, I did something, على وجهها, that means I did it according to what it's supposed to be. You can do one thing, and someone can do the same thing, but one is not doing it really in a sincere way, not in the proper way, versus someone is doing it the way it's supposed to be. Right? So this is على وجهها. أقم الصلاة على وجهها. That means establish the salah. Even the word aqimu is sufficient. But sometimes people, they need to be reminded more than just the word aqimu. Establish it the way it ought to be. Right? So this is basically what ala wajhiha. That means do it in the right way. من غير زيادة ولا نقص, without more or less. وأقصد بإقامتها وجه الله. And since it's lillah, for the sake of Allah, that means have the intention, this is your qasd, your objective, that you establish it, seeking the rewards from Allah and seeking to see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the day of judgment. Because the rewards in the hereafter, if a person receives the rewards in the hereafter, that means he's from among the believers. And the believers will see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the day of judgment, and that's the ultimate and the best rewards. وَلَا تُرَاعُ بِهَا قَرِيبًا لِقَرَابَتِهِ. So when it says وَأَقِيمُوا الشَّهَادَةَ لِلَّهِ, and stressing this meaning, why? Because the shahada, the witnessing, can be wrong for many reasons, one of which is, he says, وَلَا تُرَاعُ بِهَا قَرِيبًا. Do not acknowledge, al-mura'a is to maintain something, to acknowledge something. So do not acknowledge a relative because he's your relative. So you would witness on his favor because he's your relative. وَلَا صَاحِبًا لِمَحَبَّتِهِ, or because your friend, you don't want to upset your friend. As mentioned before, if you are brought to make shahada, to witness, if it's against your mother, if it's against your father, if it's against the entire world and whatever it contains, shahada, witness. You make shahada the same way that you see the sun. You make shahada upon what you saw with your own eyes, the same way that you see the sun. It is not sufficient to say, but my mother, she's honest and truthful, and she told me that she did this. So then he makes the shahada based on what she told him, or based on what someone else said, or maybe it wasn't clear, but to bring goodness, so that people don't divorce, or for the marriage to continue. There's children, there is situations going to happen. If it's witness, it's haram to say anything less than what is perfectly seen or heard clearly, exactly how it was seen and how it was heard, and so on. And the shahada is a huge thing. And as mentioned before, some of the Salaf, they said, I believe, they used to punish the children when they're young if they make a false testimony, even though they're not responsible for their actions. When they play around, he comes and he says, I saw so and so, children saying, taking candy without permission, and he didn't see him. Did you see him? Is that a witness? This is not just words and that's it. It doesn't mean that you have to make rulings and punishment for everyone, but to make sure to teach them not to witness over something unless they saw it with their own eyes. And they're asked to witness, not just to even intended to do evil to others. But anyway, so وَأَقِيمُوا الشَّهَادَةَ لِلَّهِ, for the sake of Allah. Do not be in the favor of others and things like this. ذَلِكُمْ, he says, ذَلِكُمْ, that is, of all of what's mentioned before, الذي ذكرنا لكم من الأحكام والحدود, from these rulings and these limits that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, يوعظ به من كان يؤمن بالله واليوم الآخر. يوعظ به, this is admonition, الوعظ, موعظة, admonition to the heart, reminding them that there's an outcome to it. There is a punishment if people do not observe these limits. There is reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala if they follow the commands of Allah. This is the موعظة. Their hearts are affected as a result of that, and for those who believe in Allah and the last day. ذلكم يوعظ به من كان يؤمن بالله واليوم الآخر. And why is that? فإن من يؤمن بالله, because the one that believes in Allah واليوم الآخر and the last day, يوجب له ذلك أن يتعظ بمواعظ الله. يوجب له ذلك. واجب, it brings by an obligation, by necessity, that he benefits from the maw'idha from Allah. That if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala command them to do something, they believe in Allah in the last day. So it comes into the heart, the fear of the punishment in the hereafter, being obedient to Allah. وأن يقدم لآخرته من الأعمال الصالحة, and he would send forth to his hereafter from the righteous deeds ما يتمكن منها, what make him well established upon, بخلاف من ترحل الإيمان عن قلبه, especially in the disputes. If a person wants to see really whether he is upon true iman or not, look at oneself when a person is in a dispute. Does he set forward the commands of Allah and what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from the person, or his egos and desires takes over, and the kibr and the arrogance? So, and that's, if someone has al-iman, he would acknowledge what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from him, even if it's against his own desire, against his own benefit, against his wealth, against everything. And it's a very difficult thing. Imagine you, or even in a daily dispute or something like that with your child, with your wife, or whatever. And then when you're talking or so, you realize that she's right. To realize that this is a great favor, even if a person, usually a person heart is covered. But to realize this is one favor from Allah. And then the difficult part is to immediately accept it. Oh, you're right. And I'm wrong in this. Even if, see, that means all of your history of disputes, you've been always wrong. It doesn't matter. Let them think that way. It doesn't matter. But in that particular thing, you would not allow yourself to be arrogant, to say, to hide the truth, because otherwise they'll think that I'm not credible anymore. Doesn't matter. To fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, especially with these matters of disputes, billah, if a person ruin himself. Because the iman, ذلكم يوعظ به من كان يؤمن بالله واليوم الآخر. Therefore, if the iman, he says, ومن ترحل الإيمان بخلاف من ترحل الإيمان عن قلبه. Those who al-iman tarahal, al-rihla is the trip, you know, when you take a trip, that means moved away. If al-iman removed from his heart, فإنه لا يبالي بما أقدم عليه من الشر. He doesn't really care whether he's doing something evil or something good, because the iman is not strong in the heart. ولا يعظم, he does not exalt مواعظ الله, the admonitions from Allah. لعدم الموجب لذلك, because the al-mujib, what makes it as an obligation or by necessity, is not there anymore. So therefore, a sign of al-iman, whether it's present or not, or weak or strong, is when a person make ta'zeem and exalt the commands of Allah. I will just finish the sentence and stop, inshallah. ولما كان الطلاق قد يوقع في الضيق والكرب والغم أمر تعالى بتقوى. The rest of the verse will continue that, inshallah ta'ala, tomorrow. Since الطلاق or divorce can make the person fall into a ضيق, tightness, karb, sadness, gham, distress, and things like this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded the people to be upon the taqwa of Allah and giving them the great rewards. Whoever fears Allah is dutiful to Allah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make ways out for them. So the more concern that a person should have is the fear of Allah, to apply the commands of Allah, not his own benefit as a result of marriage or talaq or whatever. And even though this is specific for a talaq, but the general meaning of it is true at all times, and this is something that he will explain, inshallah ta'ala, opposite to what people might think. If I say this, oh, things will be difficult for me. No, if you fear Allah, if you're obedient to Allah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will make ways out for you. But we'll stop here, inshallah ta'ala, because of the time. So we stopped at what he says, فَإِذَا أَرَادَ الْعَبْدُ الطَّلَقِ. If the person then intend to make a talaq. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us among those who listen and benefit, to apply the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the way it ought to be. صلى الله وسلم وبارك على محمد وصحبه وسلم. سبحانك اللهم ربنا وبحمدك اشهد ان لا اله الا انت استغفرك واتوب اليك.